At 2 months old, Matthew Perry was given his first drug. His parents, a folk singer and a beauty queen, as he later described them, were exhausted by their colicky, inconsolably crying newborn. They took him to a doctor. The doctor prescribed phenobarbital, a major barbiturate, a central nervous system depressant, one of the most addictive substances in clinical medicine. The crying stopped. The problem was solved with a substance, not with care. And Matthew Perry would spend the next 54 years of his life trying to replicate that relief in every possible way, until the night he was found floating, unresponsive, in the jacuzzi of his Pacific Palisades home in Los Angeles. He had survived so much. 15 rehabs. 65 detoxes. A colon that exploded in 2018 and left him in a 2-week medically induced coma while doctors told his family he had a 2% chance of living through the night.
Before his death, Matthew Perry said he wanted to be remembered for helping others overcome addiction, addressing ketamine use in his 2022 memoir, Friends, Lovers, and the Big Terrible Thing.
Ketamine felt like a giant exhale. They'd bring me into a room, sit me down, put headphones on me so I could listen to music, blindfold me, and put an IV in.
Ketamine is an FDA-approved anesthetic. Its psychedelic properties make it a party drug known as Special K, but it's increasingly being prescribed by doctors for treatment-resistant depression.
Part of the reason you're seeing that explosion right now is because there's such a need to treat these mental health conditions, and people just aren't getting the relief that they need.
So should ketamine be demonized?
It's a good question. I think my take-home for patients really is that if you are using ketamine, you want to make sure that you're using it in a strictly supervised medical professional setting.
Hundreds of ketamine clinics operate in person and online in the U.S. The legal market size expected to nearly double by 2030.
I don't think the bubble's going to burst. I think the bubble might change a little bit, and people might really be asking themselves, how am I getting this medication?
Investigators revealing how criminals are taking advantage of those seeking relief, like Perry.
That investigation has revealed a broad, underground criminal network.
This week, federal investigators arrested 5 people in connection with Perry's death. 2 doctors, a live-in personal assistant, an acquaintance, and a drug dealer known as the Ketamine Queen, who provided Perry with the drug after doctors limited his treatment.
They saw him as a payday. It doesn't matter if you're wearing a doctor's coat or you're a member of a cartel or you're a drug dealer on the street. We're going to hold you accountable.
Following the arrests, Perry's family saying in a statement, "We look forward to justice taking its course."
He had 4 people placed on life support alongside him that night. He was the only one who survived. He had spent, by his own careful accounting, $9 million fighting the disease that chased him across 3 decades, through the peak of his fame and back down the other side. He had been clean. He had been hopeful. In 2022, he published a memoir, a brutally honest, funny, and heartbreaking account of addiction, that became a #1 New York Times bestseller. He titled it Friends, Lovers, and the Big Terrible Thing. In it, he wrote, "My hope is that people will relate to it and know this disease attacks everybody. It doesn't matter if you're successful or not, the disease doesn't care." He said he hoped to be remembered more for helping people get sober than for anything he had ever done on television. He was not remembered that way. He was found dead 4 days before the 1-year anniversary of his memoir's publication. And what federal investigators uncovered in the months that followed was not a story about a man who relapsed. It was a story about a network of people who looked at a vulnerable, trusting, and deeply lonely man, and decided he was worth more to them sick than sober. Matthew Langford Perry was born on August 19, 1969, in Williamstown, Massachusetts. His mother, Suzanne Langford, was a Canadian woman who would go on to become the press secretary for Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau.
Defendant Placentia saw this as an opportunity to profit off of Mr. Perry. He wrote in a text message in September 2023, quote, "I wonder how much this moron will pay." He also stated in text messages that he wanted to be Mr. Perry's sole source of supply. He wrote in a text message that he wanted to be Mr. Perry's, quote, "go-to for drugs." As a doctor, Defendant Placentia knew full well the danger of what he was doing. Defendant Placentia knew full well the danger of what he was doing. In fact, on one occasion, he injected Mr. Perry with ketamine, and he saw Mr. Perry freeze up and his blood pressure spike. Despite that, he left additional vials of ketamine for defendant Iwamasa to administer to Mr. Perry. Defendant Placentia knew what he was doing was harming Mr. Perry. He had spoken to another patient in mid-October 2023, and he told that patient that Mr. Perry was spiraling out of control with his addiction. Nonetheless, defendant Placentia continued to offer ketamine to Mr. Perry.
The father of Justin Trudeau. His father, John Bennett Perry, was an actor, singer, and model who eventually became famous for appearing in Old Spice commercials. They divorced when Matthew was 1 year old. He shuttled between them. His mother in Ottawa, Canada. His father in Los Angeles. In his memoir, he describes the flights between those two cities as a recurring childhood experience, an unaccompanied minor, alone in a plane seat, belonging fully to neither world. He writes about the loneliness of that in-between existence as something that never left him. A hole he spent his entire life trying to fill. At 14, he discovered alcohol. He remembers the exact moment, lying in the grass in Ottawa after sharing a bottle of wine with friends, feeling warmth spread through him and thinking, this must be the way that normal people feel all the time. He was 14 years old. He had found the thing that made him feel less alone. And he would spend the next 40 years chasing that feeling. By 15, he had moved to Los Angeles to be closer to his father. He attended the Buckley School in Sherman Oaks. He was a nationally ranked junior tennis player in Canada. He was charming, funny, and sharply intelligent, someone who could walk into any room and hold it. By his early 20s, he was auditioning in Hollywood. In 1994, at the age of 24, Matthew Perry was cast as Chandler Bing in a new NBC sitcom called Friends.
We believe that a full and evidentiary hearing will reveal exactly what was going on and will give the judge the complete background to do what we think is fair and just in this case.
The attorney for Jasveen Sonia, the so-called Ketamine Queen, speaking on her behalf after she pled guilty Wednesday to 5 drug charges, including dealing the ketamine that led to actor Matthew Perry's death. Sonia accepting the plea agreement in exchange of prosecutors dropping 3 other drug offenses. Her guilty plea now means the 42-year-old faces up to 45 years in federal prison.
I think she's already got over a year. We're going to advocate that we have a full presentation that we'll make to the judge, and I'm not at the point where we're going to say how much time. I think that most people, if you talk to them about this case, their biggest problem with it is, why is she in custody and the people, whether it's medical professionals or the people who are actually ingesting the drug or the people who are administering the drug, are out.
This deal comes a year after a handful of defendants were charged in the star's death nearly 2 years ago. The 54-year-old was found unresponsive in a hot tub at his LA home. The medical examiner ruled the Friends star died on October 28th from an overdose of ketamine, which is typically used during surgery. Matthew Perry had been using a prescribed dose of ketamine for depression, but prosecutors claim he wanted more and went through the Ketamine Queen. Prosecutors also say he paid $6,000 cash for the drug 4 days before his death. Sonia's co-defendants include doctors and Perry's assistant, who also reached a deal with prosecutors for their cooperation.
He had actually already committed to another pilot, a show called LAX 2194, but he managed to get out of it and take the Friends role instead. What happened next is television history. Friends debuted on September 22, 1994, and became one of the most watched shows in the world. For 10 seasons, Matthew Perry made a generation of people laugh. His timing, his delivery, the way he could turn a single raised eyebrow into a punchline. And he did it while fighting a war inside his own body that nobody watching could see. He was drinking before arriving on set. He was taking up to 55 Vicodin pills a day by the middle of the show's run, after a jet ski accident in 1997 sent him to a Las Vegas hospital, and a doctor handed him a painkiller prescription that, as Perry later wrote, felt like warm honey entering my veins. He weighed 128 pounds. His castmates Jennifer Aniston, Courtney Cox, Lisa Kudrow, Matt LeBlanc, David Schwimmer, staged an intervention that he was not ready to hear. They kept showing up for him anyway. Cox later said that watching him go through it was terrifying. Aniston said he was one of the most sensitive people I've ever met. I don't remember 3 years of it, Perry admitted in a 2016 interview about Friends. 3 full years of a show watched by 30 million people. Gone. And yet, he kept performing. He never missed his mark. He never missed a filming day. And in season 9, the only season he was fully sober for, he received his only Emmy nomination for the role. The decades after Friends were a cycle of sobriety, relapse, recovery, and relapse again. He went to rehab 15 times. He underwent 14 stomach surgeries related to his addiction.
So we're smiling for camera?
Yeah.
No, nothing special. No, yeah, we had a really good idea that this had a very good shot at least having a chance at being successful, and then just from the script, and then when we found out where NBC was putting it on the lineup, we just said, if somebody's going to mess this up, it's going to be us, and so let's not, and hopefully we haven't. There you go. But we haven't, so there you go. All right, very good.
Including the 2018 emergency surgery for his exploded colon that left him in a coma for 2 weeks, wearing a colostomy bag for 9 months afterward. He opened Perry House, a sober living facility for men, in his former Malibu mansion in 2013. He received the Champion of Recovery Award from the White House Office of National Drug Control Policy the same year. He spent thousands of hours in AA meetings, approximately 6,000 by his own count. He wrote the memoir. He did the work. And then, in the fall of 2023, the network found him. What investigators would later piece together was a timeline of exploitation that began in September 2023, just weeks before his death, when an unidentified patient of a Santa Monica doctor named Salvador Plasencia called that doctor and told him about a high-profile person who was seeking ketamine and was willing to pay cash and lots of thousands for it. Plasencia, who operated an urgent care clinic in Calabasas under the nickname Dr. P, contacted his mentor, a San Diego physician named Mark Chavez who had previously operated a ketamine clinic, and told him about the opportunity. Chavez sold Plasencia vials of liquid ketamine, each one costing approximately $12. Plasencia charged Perry $2,000 per vial. In a text message to Chavez, Plasencia wrote, "I wonder how much this moron will pay." Chavez replied, "Let's find out." Perry had been receiving legitimate, supervised ketamine infusion therapy for depression and anxiety through a proper medical provider. It was, and is, an FDA-approved treatment for depression. His regular provider had been giving him scheduled infusions. But Perry wanted more, and faster, and when his legitimate doctors declined to increase his dose, he looked elsewhere. Plasencia began visiting Perry's Pacific Palisades home to administer ketamine directly.
Yeah.
Are you on NBC? Yes.
Yeah.
We're not here. We're not here. Go away. Hey guys.
No. Are we taking them? No.
Jasvine accepted responsibility. Sentencing was put over until December, and at which time we believe that a full and evidentiary hearing will reveal exactly what was going on and will give the judge the complete background to do what we think is fair and just in this case. I think that most people, if you talk to them about this case, their biggest problem with it is, why is she in custody and the people, whether it's medical professionals or the people who are actually ingesting the drug or the people who are administering the drug, are out? And I think that there's some quirks in the law and there's some quirks in the equitable circumstances, and I think that's exactly why it took so long. I think she's already got over a year. We're going to advocate that you have a full presentation that we'll make to the judge, and I'm not. Look, she feels horrible about all of this. I mean, nobody wants to be in the chain of causation, for lack of a better term. So yeah, she feels horrible, and she's felt horrible since day one.
For you guys, how would you describe her disposition today?
Serious, solemn, and clearly dealing with it as best she can. This has been a horrendous experience.
Are you guys saying?
On one visit, he was paid $12,000 for the session. He left vials and lozenges with Perry's personal assistant to administer in between visits. On at least one occasion, Placencia administered ketamine to Perry in a parking lot near an aquarium in Long Beach. When Chavez heard about that, he reprimanded Placencia for dosing people in cars, and in a public place where children are present. The network was now complete. Placencia sourced ketamine from Chavez, a broker named Eric Fleming. A 54-year-old man from Hawthorne, California, connected Placencia's operation to a larger supply chain. And at the top of that supply chain was a woman named Jasveen Sunga. Sunga was 41 years old, from North Hollywood, and she presented herself on Instagram as a socialite, traveling the world, photographed with wealthy and famous people, living a life of glamour and access. Federal investigators had a different description for her. They called her the Ketamine Queen. They alleged she was one of the most prolific ketamine distributors in the Los Angeles area, selling to high-end clients who could pay high-end prices and who would not go to the police. When DEA agents raided her North Hollywood home in March 2024, they found approximately 79 vials of ketamine, 3 pounds of orange pills containing methamphetamine, psilocybin mushrooms, cocaine, and prescription drugs that appeared to have been fraudulently obtained. The fifth member of the network was the person Perry trusted most. His live-in personal assistant, Kenneth Iwamasa, 59 years old. Iwamasa had worked for Perry for years. He knew Perry's routines, his vulnerabilities, his daily schedule. He had access to everything. And when Perry asked him, in September 2023, to help him procure ketamine from sources outside his medical team, giving Iwamasa cash and the promise of reimbursement, Iwamasa agreed. He began obtaining ketamine from Fleming.
The second doctor charged in the overdose death of actor Matthew Perry has learned his sentence.
Mark Chavez will not go to prison. He was sentenced to home detention and supervised release. Chavez pleaded guilty last year to the charge of conspiracy to distribute ketamine. Prosecutors say he sold ketamine to another doctor, Salvador Placencia, who then sold the drugs to Perry. The Friends star was found dead at his home back in 2023. Earlier this month, Placencia was sentenced to 2.5 years in prison.
NBC News entertainment correspondent Chloe Malas joins us now. Chloe, can you walk us through this sentence? What did Chavez say about the punishment?
Yes, so I'll tell you what he said outside the courthouse in just a moment. But like you said, he has been sentenced to home confinement, 8 months at home, and then he will have 300 hours of community service that he has to do. And I think that what's interesting about this, you guys, is that the government was seeking 6 months for him home confinement. So you saw the judge go a little bit higher on that sentence. Now, his team, they don't really consider this a win, actually, because they wanted him to have time served in community service and supervised release. But again, they split the baby here and he has 8 months. But I mean, when you look at what he was facing before this plea deal, years in prison. So it looks like he got off pretty lucky. And then outside the courthouse, he said that his heart goes out to the family. And he thanked his legal team. He thanked his own family for standing by him. And, you know, the defense team has said that he is very remorseful, that he's lost everything. But, you know, Matthew Perry lost his life. But his legal team has said that, you know, now he's an Uber driver and that he's been struggling to make ends meet. But at the end of the day, again, like I said before, before. It's a win for his team for him to be sentenced to 8 months home confinement.
And Chloe, we know 3 other people pleaded guilty in connection to Perry's death. They have not yet been sentenced, but remind us about their cases.
Yes, so I mean, you're going to have Kenneth Iwamasa, Matthew Perry's former personal assistant. He'll be sentenced in January. You're also going to have Eric Fleming, who was somebody who played a role in distributing some of these drugs and connecting people together. He'll have his sentencing in January as well, and it all culminates to Yasveen Sangha, who was dubbed the Ketamine Queen, where she will have her sentencing in February. So all of this happening after the new year.
He stored it in the home. And he began administering it himself, injecting Perry with ketamine regularly despite having absolutely no medical training whatsoever. According to his own plea agreement, Iwamasa injected Perry with ketamine multiple times on the day Perry died. Then he left the house to run errands. When he returned to the Pacific Palisades home on the afternoon of October 28, 2023, he found Matthew Perry unresponsive in the jacuzzi of his backyard. He called 911. First responders arrived and found Perry floating in the water. The levels of ketamine in Perry's system at the time of his death were equivalent to the amount used to induce general anesthesia for surgery. His heart had been overwhelmed. His breathing had stopped. He had slipped beneath the water. The Los Angeles County Medical Examiner ruled the cause of death as the acute effects of ketamine, with drowning, coronary artery disease, and the effects of buprenorphine listed as contributing factors. The manner of death, accidental. But it was not accidental in any meaningful sense of the word. It was a predictable, preventable outcome of a deliberate scheme by people who knew exactly what they were doing and chose to do it anyway. When news of Perry's death broke on October 28, 2023, and spread across the world within hours, 2 of the 5 people most directly responsible for it were already covering their tracks. Sangha texted Fleming immediately, "Delete all our messages." Placencia, in the months that followed, provided federal investigators with falsified medical records, fabricated treatment plans, invented notes, purporting to show that he had been providing Perry with legitimate, supervised ketamine therapy. He submitted these documents in February and March of 2024, in response to a federal request for records. The falsification would become its own criminal count. The investigation moved carefully. The LAPD, the DEA, and the United States Postal Inspection Service, which had been tracking the postal routes used to ship controlled substances, worked together for months before making arrests. On August 15, 2024, 10 months after Perry's death, federal authorities held a press conference in Los Angeles and announced that 5 people had been charged in connection with his death. DEA Administrator Ann Milgram stood at the podium and said, "Matthew Perry's journey began with unscrupulous doctors who abused their position of trust because they saw him as a payday. And it ended with street dealers who sold him ketamine in unmarked vials." Iwamasa had already pleaded guilty on August 7, 1 week before the arrests, to 1 count of conspiracy to distribute ketamine causing death. Fleming pleaded guilty on August 8, Chavez followed in October 2024. Sangha, who had appeared in court in a bright green Nirvana t-shirt and large round glasses the day of her arraignment, and who a judge had ordered held without bail as a flight risk, held out the longest. In August 2025, she became the final defendant to plead guilty, accepting responsibility for 5 federal charges including providing the ketamine batch that caused Perry's death. Her attorney, the high-profile Mark Garagos, issued a statement of 3 words, "She's taking responsibility." Placencia, who had texted, "I wonder how much this moron will pay," pleaded guilty in July 2025 to 4 counts of distribution of ketamine. In December 2025, he became the first of the 5 to be sentenced. 30 months in federal prison. Sangha's sentencing was scheduled for February 25, 2026, with a maximum possible sentence of 65 years. Fleming's sentencing was set for January 7, 2026, with a maximum of 25 years. Iwamasa faced up to 15 years. Chavez faced up to 10. The man who had written, in his memoir just 1 year before his death, "I should be dead. I know that. The things I've put my body through, the situations I've survived, I should not be here." Turned out to be right that he had cheated death many times. He had survived the jet ski accident, the Vicodin spiral, the pancreatitis, the coma, the exploded colon, the 2 weeks of machines breathing for him while his family sat in a hospital waiting room and prepared to say goodbye. He did not survive a network of people who called him a moron in text messages, charged him $40,000 for $600 worth of product, falsified medical records, and left him alone in a jacuzzi while they ran their errands. Matthew Perry's memoir ended with a dedication. He wrote that he wanted to be remembered not for Chandler Bing, not for friends, not for the jokes or the timing or the fame. He wanted to be remembered, he wrote, for helping people who were struggling with addiction. He wanted to be the person who proved that recovery was possible, that the fight was worth fighting, that there was something on the other side of the big terrible thing. In the end, the big terrible thing came back. Not from inside him this time. From outside. From people who should have protected him. The Matthew Perry Foundation was launched in the days after his death, run by his family, with a mission to help people struggling with addiction. It continues to operate. Every dollar it raises is named, in a way, after what was done to him. And the 5 people who were more interested in his money than his life are now learning what it costs to treat a human being, a man who survived everything, like he was worth less than the product they were selling him.
They knew what they were doing was wrong. They knew what they were doing was risking great danger to Mr. Perry, but they did it anyways.
Nearly a year after the death of Friends star Matthew Perry, a stunning development. 5 people, including 2 doctors, charged in connection with the actor's fatal ketamine overdose.
The desperation that led Perry to these individuals was not met with help, as it should have been from the doctors, but instead it was met with exploitation. Exploitation by those who should have guided him toward help. This betrayal of trust is at the heart of this tragedy.
The defendants also include Jasveen Sangha, who prosecutors say is also known as the Ketamine Queen of North Hollywood, and Dr. Salvador Plasencia, or Dr. P of Santa Monica. Plasencia and Sangha are both charged with conspiracy to distribute ketamine, distribution of ketamine, and other charges. The 3 other defendants include Perry's 59-year-old live-in assistant, Kenneth Iwamasa, who pleaded guilty to 1 count of conspiracy to distribute ketamine, causing death, and admitted repeatedly injecting Perry with ketamine without medical training, including performing multiple injections on Perry the day he died. Perry's family releasing a statement saying, "We were and still are heartbroken by Matthew's death, but it has helped to know that law enforcement has taken this case very seriously. We look forward to justice taking its course." Last October, Perry posted this photo of himself in his hot tub wearing headphones. And just days later, Perry was found dead in his Pacific Palisades home. Law enforcement sources say that same assistant, Iwamasa, discovered the 54-year-old floating and unresponsive in that jacuzzi.
Requesting 2 additional units and a supervisor respond to Bluesdale Drive.
According to an autopsy report, Perry died from acute effects of ketamine. Drowning and coronary artery disease were listed as contributing factors.
This isn't fun, you know. You're very nice, and being interviewed by you is great, but like, it's not fun to talk about this stuff. I don't like talking about it, but I know it's going to help people to talk about it. I know the book is going to help people.
Perry, take 1. In 2022, Perry opened up to my colleague Diane Sawyer about his addiction and his best-selling memoir, Friends, Lovers, and the Big Terrible Thing.
Addiction, the big terrible thing, is far too powerful for anyone to defeat alone. But together, one day at a time, we can beat it down.
Yeah. Your disease is just outside, just doing 1-arm push-ups, just waiting for you, waiting to get you alone. Because alone, you lose to the disease. And now I finally feel okay and feel like I've got some strength.
What does it mean to feel okay?
It means that I've developed some safety nets around this, you know.
But the federal investigation reveals that Perry was once again struggling with addiction in 2023, something prosecutors say the defendants took advantage of.
Matthew Perry sought treatment for depression and anxiety and went to a local clinic where he became addicted to intravenous ketamine. When clinic doctors refused to increase his dosage, he turned to unscrupulous doctors who saw Perry as a way to make quick money.
After learning about Perry's interest in ketamine, investigators say Placencia contacted another doctor, Dr. Mark Chavez, who previously operated a ketamine clinic in order to obtain ketamine to sell to Perry. Investigators say they uncovered text messages between the two doctors in which they discussed how much to charge Perry for the ketamine, writing, "I wonder how much this moron will pay. Let's find out."
He also stated in text messages that he wanted to be Mr. Perry's sole source of supply. He wrote in a text message that he wanted to be Mr. Perry's, quote, go-to for drugs.
They allegedly charged Perry $2,000 for a ketamine vial worth just $12.
Over 2 months, from September to October 2023, they distributed approximately 20 vials of ketamine to Mr. Perry in exchange for $55,000 in cash. Defendant Placencia saw this as an opportunity to profit off of Mr. Perry.
One of the other defendants was Eric Fleming, a broker who worked with Sangha and allegedly distributed the ketamine that led to Perry's death. Fleming allegedly wrote in a text message, quote, "I wouldn't do it if there wasn't a chance of me making some money for doing this." Prosecutors alleging the defendants knew what they were doing was wrong.
When they'd refer to the ketamine, they used coded language. They'd refer to it using terms such as, quote, Dr. Pepper, or quote, bots, or quote, cans. Also, defendants Placencia and Chavez, as medical doctors, knew full well this was not the proper way to administer ketamine, and they even talked about that in their exchanges.
Ketamine is an FDA-approved controlled substance. It's a short-acting but powerful anesthetic that's also used off-label as an alternative therapy for depression. Allegedly, one reason Perry used it.
It's a great choice for an anesthetic, and for sedation. It affects memory and it affects, the patient's ability to process pain.
Ketamine is also used and abused recreationally.
Ketamine misuse is increasing, and it is fairly common, and we see it in the hospital often. While this drug may be considered safer than some other drugs that are out there on the street, people don't realize how habit-forming it can be.
Patients taking ketamine therapy should be supervised and administered to by a healthcare professional, something prosecutors say did not happen with Perry in the days before his death.
When people start using ketamine recreationally and they're not being monitored, that's when they're opening themselves up to a whole host of issues and problems and dangers.
I'm Chandler. I make jokes when I'm uncomfortable.
Well, I loved Chandler. I loved the show, and I also remember this because it's going to be the best time of your life. And I knew it.
Perry skyrocketed to fame on the hit TV series Friends, and it's impossible to imagine anyone else playing Chandler Bing.
Okay, who wants light cheese and who wants dark cheese?
Other than the handsome, hilarious, and quick-witted Matthew Perry, cast when he was just 24.
Someone at work ate my sandwich.
Well, what did the police say?
Sarcastic, charming, and that comic timing. For 10 seasons on Friends, for multiple generations of viewers, Perry could make it all look so easy. But for him, for decades, nothing was easy.
It's the time I should have been the toast of the town. I was in a dark room meeting with nothing but drug dealers and completely alone for months.
Behind the scenes, addiction and alcohol and later prescription painkillers would repeatedly fling Perry into a decades-long hellscape, leading to extreme fluctuations in his weight and countless months in rehab. Perry said he went through detox roughly 65 times. Castmates coming to his aid during dark times, like Jennifer Aniston.
Jenny, yeah.
And she says, "We know you were drinking."
Yeah, imagine how scary a moment that was. And I said, how? I thought I was hiding it so well. And she said, we can smell it. We can smell it. But I wasn't in a position to stop, and that's what addiction is.
He hoped his experiences would help others.
When someone calls you for help and says, I'm in trouble, what do you want to say to them first?
I say, come over. Let's talk. A guy coming up to me and saying, can you help me stop drinking? And I can say yes and follow up and help the person. And I see the light come on in their eyes, and I have the answer because of stumbling so much. I can help them. So
Saving each other,
because he eventually figures out that he's saving me too.
Late today, the so-called Ketamine Queen and one of the doctors, Placencia, pleading not guilty, and Placencia released on a $100,000 bond. How did your client feel about being lumped in with somebody called the Ketamine Queen of Los Angeles?
Well, he doesn't appreciate the association by any stretch of the imagination. At the end of the day, Dr. Placencia was providing medical treatment to Mr. Perry. He was operating, in good faith under what he believed was his duty under the Hippocratic Oath.
Dr. Placencia is facing up to 120 years in federal prison, while the Ketamine Queen faces life in prison for the allegations against them.
In recent years, other drug-related celebrity deaths have led authorities to prosecute the people who supplied the drugs, including rapper Mac Miller's fatal overdose of cocaine, alcohol, and counterfeit oxycodone that contained fentanyl. Two of the men who provided him with the fentanyl were later convicted of distributing the drug. On Thursday in Los Angeles, investigators vowed to crack down on the drug suppliers.
By filing these extensive and serious charges, we are sending a clear message. If you are in the business of selling dangerous drugs, we will hold you accountable for the deaths that you cause.